What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the E21NextGen podcast. I'm Augustine, and I'm super stoked that you jumped in and wanted to learn and to grow as a leader. So whether you're a kids pastor, a youth pastor, young adult pastor, a leader of a ministry organization, a nonprofit, we're just glad that you're here. And here in this community, we want to help build you up to equip and to empower the next generation to reach the globe. But let's talk to somebody right here on this call who's been a part of Empower 21 Next Gen for a minute now. He hails from the great nation of Canada. He's just to the north of where I am right now, really far north, actually, but he's up north there. Jason Persaud, welcome to the podcast, my man.
Hey, Augustine, it is so good to be with you here today. And just to clarify to people, Canada is not the 51st state. We are our own.
Just if you got confused in reading the news or any headlines, no, we have not all Americans feel that way. Many Americans respect the sovereignty of Canada. And Jason, I have a lot of respect for you, for your wife, and for the things that you're doing in Canada, but really all around the world and the opportunities that you get to do. Would you just kind of give the people who maybe don't know you on this call just an overview of who you are, what you do, and where in Canada are you?
Yeah, no, that's great. Hey, everybody, my name's Jason Persaud, and I have the privilege to serve in a full-time role with Alpha Canada as the National Director of Church Experience. That means I get to work with an incredible team that I get to lead that serves the church in Canada when it comes to coaching, equipping, training, and new ministry development across our country. And so it's exciting what God is doing in that role, as well as my wife and I co-lead and have founded two ministries. The first is called The Culture Changers. During the pandemic, we felt a need in Canada to address especially racial justice and those kinds of cultural issues that impacted the next generation. And how did Jesus lead in those significant cultural moments? And so we've been doing stuff in that space, equipping and training with churches with that. And as well, we've just launched a new initiative called the Urban Leadership Network that's geared towards vocational or co-vocational pastors that are in urban centers and that are from ethnic backgrounds and may not have the same resources to be able to do ministry. And so we just love to serve the church. We love the next generation, and that's what we get to do. And we are based in the Toronto, Ontario, Canada area. Toronto, home of the Maple Leafs. We haven't won anything, but the Raptors 2019 NBA champs, Augustine, because I know you're a basketball fan.
Yes, absolutely. Shout out to the Raptors. That was a fantastic season. I was very impressed. Yeah, I think, you do so many different things, and I'd love to kind of touch on different elements of it. I think starting with Alpha, though, I know for me personally, Alpha has been super awesome. I've gone through it. I've led young people through it, and it's such a valuable way to engage the next generation. And so I'd love to kind of hear your insights from someone in leadership in Alpha. Maybe explain a little bit more, what is Alpha for those that don't know? And then why has it been so effective at engaging young people in a lot of really hard topics, or maybe even very what we would consider simple, basic biblical topics that we actually realize the next generation doesn't know how to talk about. So will you unpack that a little bit?
Yeah, that's great, Augustine. Very simply is a resource that's been provided to the church to create safe places for people to explore faith. And so whether there are people that are what we would call seekers, maybe atheists or agnostics from different religions, questioning about purpose in life, Alpha creates the safe place for them to explore and go on this adventure or this journey. In the youth space, it's an 8-week series, and right in the middle is like an Alpha day where students get to come and hang out and have an encounter with the Holy Spirit. And it sort of walks them through this whole incremental space of, is there more to life than this? Is Jesus real? Why the Bible? And so it creates this space where people can come in with real questions and ask those questions and not feel judged or condemned or feeling like they're being debated or argued with. People respect the fact that people are coming in with this curiosity, with these questions to come and explore faith, life, meaning, and purpose. And so that's really what Alpha is. And so just to give a bigger scope for people that are listening, Alpha's been around for over 30 years. It started out of the UK. It's been in over 175 countries, and over 33 million people in the world have gone through Alpha. Just to give some context, in Canada alone, last year we had 119,000 people, what we call guests, go through Alpha, with over 52,000 coming to faith or re-engaging in their faith.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so Alpha has been around, and we've just launched a brand new global Alpha resource, a series that has just literally taken off worldwide to help students, whether they're in high school or even in elementary. I was just speaking with a youth pastor yesterday. A grade 8 student, a middle school student, had started Alpha in their school. So Alpha can be run anywhere,
Mm.
schools and cafes and sports teams, wherever it is for students, especially to lead and reach their friends with the gospel.
Come on. I love that. I'm curious. I think I know your answer, but just for conversation's sake, why do you think Alpha is so effective with young people? What makes them curious about it? What makes them stay in it? Why is it an effective tool for ministry?
Yeah, I think why Alpha has been successful overall, especially in the space for young people, the Alpha Youth Series was actually launched as a test in Canada. It was created actually by Canadians to create this space for young people to have a dialogue about faith. And I think young people, rather than wanting to be preached to, they want to be able to come into a space where they could really dive in with questions that are really in their heart that they would
Yeah.
not be able to ask maybe in a church service, but to come into a space that's safe with friends, non-judgmental, to explore really the deep things that are welling up inside of them. And it sort of brings me back to like one of the Proverbs, Augustine. One of the Proverbs talks about that wise people draw the well or the wisdom out of people. And I think people that are even searching about faith have wisdom inside them. They have deep questions that we may not have provided in our regular dynamics or paradigms of church. And Alpha creates this paradigm and dynamic where young people specifically can come in and go, I can be there with my friends. I can be in a safe place to ask questions without people pointing fingers at me. And if I need follow up, that can happen as well. And Alpha also is done over food, and which young people, doesn't like food. They love to come together. And and the fact that Alpha can be done in neutral spaces, I think is really attractive. But I think one of the big things that we have found at Alpha is in 2022, we were part of a global study called the Open Generation. And the Open Generation was done in collaboration with a number of different organizations. And it identified that this generation, more than any other generation, has a spiritual curiosity. They have an openness to spiritual things, but within the right context. And I think Alpha is that right context.
Wow, that's so true. I know from what I'm seeing, even globally, talking to so many people on the podcast, so many people in our network, it's so interesting to see this kind of almost a pre-Christian mentality for Gen Alpha, especially, where we're seeing them very open to talking about things and the things that maybe a millennial generation and upward would say, well, that's basic. Everybody knows that. They don't know the basics of faith. And even here with students, I'm talking to every day who are Gen Z. Some of the things I think they know about the Bible, they don't know some of the basics. They have actually never articulated their faith. They've never even shared their testimony. They've never explained to someone who is Jesus. And so some of the basics, what we would consider basics, being able to have those kind of conversations with young people, I think helps them deepen and mature their faith by being able to vocalize it. Or honestly, sometimes it's the awareness of, I don't know how to vocalize it. I need to learn how to vocalize it. And I think Alpha is a great way to do that. I'm curious with what you're seeing in Canada, but also maybe just what you're seeing globally as you speak and travel and go places. What is a trend you're seeing with the next generation when it comes to ministry that you feel like maybe people don't talk about enough? That's something that you're seeing that you're like, actually, this is exciting. This is potential. Are you seeing anything like that?
Yeah, I think I've seen, especially in Canada, where I get to travel extensively, is young people have a hunger for truth.
Mm.
There is a lot of noise. There is a lot of confusion. There's a lot of chaos, and there's a lot of gray that's happening, not only coming out of the pandemic, but I think about some of the things that are happening, politically, socioeconomically. There's a number of uncertainties that are out there. And I think, Augustine, just, very recently, a Canadian from Apologetics Canada by the name of Wesley Huff, on a guy named Billy Carson, who runs this organization called Forbidden Knowledge. And that's really deceiving people. And Wesley took him on and really began to pick apart, not in any kind of like way to make Billy Carson feel like he was nothing and worthless, but really began to pick away at deception and things that were gray and untrue and brought clarity to truth. As a result of that, Wesley was invited to come on Joe Rogan, which is the largest podcast in the world, and really brought a clarity to some things that I think where apologetics has been about, we need to defend our faith. I think apologetics today is about this conversation piece to be able to bring clarity in all the noise that's there. And I think that's what young people are looking for. And I think this is one of the reasons why young people today have this hunger for truth with all this noise that's happening. People like E21, our group, Terry Parkman, who's an incredible friend of ours, who really speaks deep onto cultural discernment and the shifts that are happening, and some of the other great leaders that are part of our network. But I'm just thinking about Wesley as a Canadian, really spearheading to cut through all the noise so that young people could go, yeah, that makes sense. Even a lack of moral clarity. Young people want a compass of how they can live their lives with moral clarity as well. And I think scripture and I think the Bible really brings that, because there's a lot of stuff that's just gray, confusing for young people today.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember watching the Wesley Huff interview on Joe Rogan, and then, going through all the things and seeing his debate with Billy Carson, and the amount of young people I talked to that were inspired by his example, because he is very knowledgeable. And he's probably studied the Bible more than any of us ever will, the languages, the history. But I think what people are inspired by was he knew what he believed, and he knew why he believed it. And I think that's something that young people are looking for themselves. But it starts with leadership and modeling that and teaching them and equipping them to do that. And so I'd love for maybe you to give some advice to next gen leaders in spaces all around the world that are listening to this, that maybe want to create an atmosphere where they can have dialogue with students, where they can maybe walk into some gray areas with students and dialogue and kind of piece out the nuances of different cultural realities. What is your advice based on your experience and your knowledge with Alpha and everything you've kind of led through? What kind of advice would you pass on to these leaders in these spaces, whether they be youth pastors, ministers, and kids or young adults? How do they create these spaces where students want to open up, where students feel like they can be vulnerable?
Yeah. Augustine, that's such a great question. I've been in next gen ministry for over 30 years, 23 years as a pastor. So if you're a next gen pastor that's listening, one of the excuses I used to make early on, especially as a young next gen pastor leading different ministries, I've served in a few different churches. I always made excuses why I couldn't have a discipleship pathway. We're not at that stage to be able to do a discipleship pathway. And I think it's important from the get-go, whatever stage of youth ministry or next-gen ministry you're in, whether you are new to a youth ministry and you've just started, or you're just having the building blocks in youth ministry, creating space to mentor and invest in students is crucial. And so I don't think services provide that. And I don't think sometimes small groups necessarily provide that. Terry Parkman, who's our good friend, says sometimes, our small groups are celebrated relationships.
Yeah.
And it's just our group and no more. So I think, looking where you can create space to really dialogue with students, sometimes even on their ground and on their terms, is absolutely crucial to know what's going on inside of their hearts. And so that's one piece. And then that whole discipleship piece, that mentoring, coaching, and having a pathway so that students can grow intentionally in their faith, but also have space as well to be able to ask questions and dialogue. I feel like faith today, Augustine, students need a massage and have a dialogue to be able to grow. And that requires an investment, not just of next gen pastors and leaders, parents and those grandparents and young adult leaders that are invested in next gen ministry. We need to make sure we create space for that so that students can fully continue to grow and be mature as they grow in their faith.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of responsibility on the leadership, right? Like if we're going to be leaders that lead the next generation, it has to be more than we love to preach, or we love social media, or we love youth ministry retreats or games. Like it has to go beyond that, especially nowadays. And I think there's a phrase that goes, when you stop learning, you've started the countdown on your own relevance.
Yeah.
And I wonder, you've done ministry for so long, you've been in the next gen space for so long. What has kept you a learner? Like, what keeps you leaning in when it's easy for a lot of people in ministry to be like, I know what I know, I'm good. But you're someone that I've seen just continue to lean into cultural conversations. Even you bring up Wesley Huff, like, you know what young people are thinking about, apologetics, culture, theology. What keeps your heart and your mind engaged in, like, I want to continue to learn the next generation when things continue to evolve, especially today with such a fast paced world? How do you stay motivated to keep learning?
Yeah. One of the things that I've done, especially more intentionally over the last 10 years, is I've surrounded myself with friends in ministry that are hungry for God, but are also hungry to learn. And
Mm,
I think, it's important for us to have a circle of friends. It doesn't have to be large, but having a circle of ministry friends that can inspire me, that can challenge me, that can spur me on to continue to grow. I've got to be honest with you, Augustine. Back in 2019, or 2018, I sort of hit this wall in ministry where I just felt like I wasn't growing. My pastor encouraged me to go back to school. Not to get a theological degree. I went back to do my master's in practical theology and leadership. And for me, it was to sort of kickstart and jumpstart some, growth. So for me, that just accelerated the importance of surrounding yourself with people. I don't think you have to go to and further your education, even though I do think it's important, but I do think it's important to self lead yourself.
mm,
Leadership starts with you. And to
yeah.
lead yourself, you need to have a desire to grow and to learn. And you've got to be on that journey yourself. But if you're struggling leading yourself, it's good to have others around you to help be that encouragement for you. And I would say leading myself and having others around me has been two of the greatest things with that. And then E21 has been an incredible network where I have felt encouraged by you, Augustine, Ali, your wife, other great leaders that have really been inspiring for me to continue. And I think being a part of a network like E21 is absolutely crucial to continue to grow in faith and spur that on. And so if you're listening, this is not a sell for E21 in that sense, but this is a genuine call to say we need to be part of something larger than ourselves to grow. And I think 21, we've done master classes. There's different kinds of events that have happened. There's conferences, there's gatherings that happen in order to make that happen. And I know for me, someone being in the next gen space for a long time, rubbing shoulders with leaders from all different spaces and contexts and ages, man, has just fueled me even that much more. And I'm so honored to be part of what E21 is doing.
Absolutely. I think for you and I, being at these events, being around the people, such genuine people, and you leave refreshed, you leave encouraged, you leave motivated and inspired to say, I want to do this better, or I feel energized to keep going. And I think that's a big thing for next gen leaders is it is taxing to lead with young people all the time. The times of day, the weekends, the nights, the events, all the things, it takes a toll. So I'd love to ask you that one more question, I guess, is what would be your encouragement to next gen leaders that are listening, again, from all around the world in different areas of ministry? What would be your encouragement to them? Maybe those that are feeling kind of tired, worn, have the heart and the desire to do it, but it can be taxing. What would your encouragement be to them?
Yeah. Ministry can never be done alone. And so my encouragement, I love the fact that I have older mentors in my life to be able to pour into me when I'm feeling tired or burnt out or frustrated or whatever that feeling is in ministry, because it's not easy. And I think it's important for young leaders to have others in their lives that have a little bit more experience and laneway and just overall life experience in itself. So I would encourage you, find even if it's just one person. And you might be in a rural area where there's very few opportunities for relationship. Just pray that God would bring that one person there. You may be in a city where there's a lot of opportunity for that. But I think one person in our life can definitely make a difference. Relationship means everything. And I know even in our network, that relationship side has been encouraging. And so I would encourage you, if you don't have someone local, reach out to E21 and see where you can be connected here to help encourage you in your journey in ministry.
Absolutely. I think that's great encouragement. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for being on here today. I know you're a busy guy, so taking the time out of your schedule to just sit and chat with us, it means a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Augustine. This was great. Love what you're doing, continuing to, just to pray for you guys and believe and all that E21 is doing. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If you've enjoyed this conversation, feel free to jump down. There's a link to the WhatsApp group where you can jump in and be a part of Empower 21 Next Gen. So go ahead and go to the description. You can do that. But thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll see you next week for the next episode.